Hi folks, welcome back to the channel once again. Thank you for joining me. This is a video I hadn't actually planned and sort of sprung into my head as a concept just a couple of days ago, because I've had some feedback from subscribers and viewers just in the last week actually, where people are talking about books I've recommended, or I think it was the Su-35 Flanker book by a couple of Russian guys. And there was another reference book, and I'm trying to think which one it was, from a couple of months ago, and I remember thinking, oh, I should maybe do a talk about books and the value of reference books. So I thought we'd do that today. So we're kicking off having a look at one or two finished models and a couple of the books that were inspirational for me. Doesn't mean that they're the best book or you should buy these books or anything like that. Just to get you thinking about books and how helpful they are, not only in building the models, just giving you the inspiration to sort of start building them, to be honest, because I find sometimes, you know, it's like you can have all the best intentions that I'll build that next month, you know, and next month comes and goes and you don't get it done. And it's just hard to motivate yourself sometimes, and these books, I think, help a lot. You enjoy a good book, if it's just a reference book. Some of them are just like photographic and diagrammatic books with a bit of history. Some go into more detail, some are personal experience books. So we'll have a look at a couple, but before we do, let's have a look at these models. So we'll have a zoom in. We have got here the Tamiya mid-production Tiger 1. Not an expensive kit by any stretch of the imagination. I think I paid about £12 for this, if that. Maybe 15, but not much more. Readily available. But I have upgraded it. We've got here the Fruel metal tracks, which, yeah, they are a bit of a pain because you've got to put pins in them and you've got to do little bits of drilling out to clean them up. But they are heavy, weighty metal tracks and they just look brilliant. I really think that it gives the tank that sort of weighty track appearance. And we've got on top, it's actually Michael Wittmann's tank from the Battle of Villers-Bocage. What's that? I think it's the 8th of July, was it, in Normandy? Thereabouts, early July anyway. And we've got some of the, I think it's the Dragon Panzer Aces, Panzer personnel. And we've also got, I think, a Tamiya figure as well. So they've come out quite decent, I think. Yeah, not the most weathered Tiger, but I don't think the Tiger in question was very weathered. Well, not at the start of the day anyway. Later on that day, I think very weathered. I think it actually got abandoned. I think they got all the tracks shot off. They did a lot of damage anyway, going through the British force that took the town. I think it was the Desert Rats. And they got a real kick in Villers-Bocage. A story worth reading up on if you don't know anything about it, trust me. One of the great battles in the Battle for Normandy. And we lost, the British lost a huge number of Cromwell tanks, personnel carriers, Bren gun carriers. Basically this one tank just rampaged through this town, blowing up everything that moved. Until later in the day the British retreated, then came back with some couple of Sherman Fireflies, and they started to hit back then, but the damage was done, and they lost something like 30 vehicles, of which about 15 to 16 I think were tanks, Cromwell tanks, knocked out all over the place. Disaster, quite frankly. Anyway, I digress. Yeah, it's a nice kit, to be honest, and I mean there are much better Tiger kits today. Personally, from what I've seen, I think the best one I've seen is the Ryefield. They do several variants of it and it's a beautiful kit. So I recommend that one to you. So let's get on to talking about these books. So we're talking about the Tiger. So I will now see if I can get you an appropriate book. And we have one. This is going to disturb my lighting because I've got it resting on these books, which I believe not very well planned out. But anyway, here we go. So first place to start, if you're new in the hobby and you don't know, what sort of books to buy, you don't want to spend too much money, I'd go for one of these Osprey publishing books. They are really, really good. And we have here the Tiger 1 Heavy Tank 1942 to 45, a book that costs £9.99, so it's under £10. Yes, it's not a big book. I'm not sure about the value, but anyway, it does have some interesting, illustrations in it. So you get lots and lots of helpful sort of colour schemes and things. I'm going to shut that light off, because if I don't, it's going to give us some trouble, I think, with the exposure. Here we go. So you get some really nice colour illustrations. You get very detailed diagrams showing the whole breakdown of the tank. You get some great photos in theatre. I think this is the Russian front, actually. Russian front, there we go. That's an early production Tiger, I think. And you get operational history. You get these, all the stats are here. Penetration of the 88mm gun. Lots of data. It shows them being tested. Just reading where that is. That's quite an interesting place. It looks like Italy to me. North Africa. So it talks about development of the tank from its early stages and the concept being tested in Germany, right through to these battles I've just been alluding to in 1944-45, where it's thick in the battle for Normandy. Very, very big on the Russian front. And there's a shot from Normandy. That's in a similar scheme to mine, in fact. SS Panzerab Thailand 101, January 44. And it's at the rear, before Normandy, of course. It even gives you all sorts of statistics about their operational numbers, modifications that were made. Very useful book, I've got to say. For a tenner, can't go wrong with that. Definitely a good place to start. So there's one of interest for you. The second one, and there's, again, I just want to be clear. I'm just sharing some good books that I recommend, but I'm not saying I recommend them over others, because there's so many books on Tiger tanks. I mean, we could be talking till Christmas about them. There's probably thousands, to be honest. But I got given one as a gift, and this is a real corker. It's really giving you the full detail. It's called Tigers at the Front. Big, heavy, serious book by Thomas J. Lenz. It says $30 in the US, so that's probably about £30 UK. I don't know if it says UK price, doesn't do. It won't be cheap. It says $40. Hardcover, $40. Anyway, I'm guessing this is about £20 to £25. It'll be cheap book. Now in this one, we do see one or two of the photos, obviously we saw in the first one, but this goes into so much more depth. You have to forgive me, I've got my kit behind. I don't want to touch it or damage it. Be careful here. I'll zoom you in a bit more though, if I can find the zoomer. Here we go. So, this is basically a very highly photograph heavy book. It's really photos in theatre, showing them being damaged, tested, knocked out, in the middle of battles on the Eastern Front. And it sort of goes through every theatre that it's operated in great detail. Talks about modifications, talks about maintenance, photographs of it being stripped in bits. At the end of the war, the ones that recovered, including the King Tigers, Tiger II, or Königstiger, they called it in Germany. And, this is a great resource. I mean, just invaluable. Some of these after the battle shots where the tank's been knocked out. Brilliant. Just an amazing book. A big wieldy one, mind. It's not. That's why I'm having trouble with it getting on the camera for you, but a fantastic resource, not to be missed. If you can get your hands on that, probably got one of the best ones on the market. But I say there are many, so it's not an exclusive list. So that's Tigers. Then we are going to talk about the other model we have over here. So we're just going to have a little change of model diorama. If we do a bit of a swap around. See those heavy tracks sagging, can't you? You really do sag. I lost my man, I thought it was going to happen. Right, we're just going to move our ammunition loader there, put him out of the way, over here, and we're going to move in the Luftwaffe. Now then, Some of you may have seen this from one or two of my previous videos. So it's the Meng Me163B Comet, and it's a really nice kit. Did have some issues with it. I won't bore you with it all now because we've talked about this in the past, but it does have a few issues around the way the join and some of the fitting. Not a Tamiya standard, but the detail and the way it's finished is really excellent, and it really looks the part, you know. So we'll zoom in a bit more, see if you can see these some of this cockpit detail and the engine detail. So we've got, for example, I'm just going to come behind the camera just to give you a better view of all this. I think we'll get a far better experience. So we've got here, it's got its dolly, undercarriage dolly, as you can see. It's got a really nice interior, which has been improved by the Edward Zoom set. We have this really nice tail section, because obviously it's a rocket motor this rather than a jet. And we've got that sitting on its little plinth sort of stand, and then at the back you've got the rocket motor itself, and there's some really nice detail in this kit. In fact, I'm going to turn it around for you so you can actually see the full effect of some of the detail, which is not visible at that angle, so bear with me. Let's see what we can come up with here. I just hit that white as well. Give us a bit more light. See what we got. Now then. So you can see the detail of the jet pipe, and here you can probably catch some of the canopy detail as well. You can see the bullets for the cannon, 30mm cannons. And all in all, really quite a nice item to have in the collection, to be fair. I wonder if I can get you so you can see this canopy interior. I think we're going to go into the cockpit. Hold on a second. We're going in, as they say. There we are. We get some additional lighting to help us. You can see the Edward Zoom set there. Quite a lot of detail in the cockpit. It's got a nice set of, just have to zoom out a little bit so I can focus. Nice set of PE instruments, and it's got some nice, you can just see them, but it's got the seat belts as well, which are really quite impressive. Yeah, there they are. Anyway, let's come back and talk about the books. So, you can see it's got its T-Stoff and C-Stoff fuel loading ports as well for this rather dangerous hydrogen peroxide based fuel system, which is not recommended from a health and safety point of view at all. I'm going to bring you back. Sorry for making you feel a bit sick. There we go. And that. Okay, sorry about that little diversion. But I thought it was worthwhile to have a little closer look at it, and yeah, you can see the, turn this around, you can see some of the detail. Also from an Edward set, there's some PE additional parts that gave the framework, you can see, of the inside the fuselage. Really nice. Got to say, I was really impressed with all that. So, quite a nice setup. But we need inspiration. We need inspiration from books. So, let's see what we've got then. In the way of books. Now, I had a really unusual book for this one. Just going to bring it out a little bit here. There we go. So I'm going to knock these lights off, because otherwise we're going to have some exposure problem. There we go. Bring the light in here. There's that. Better. There we are. Now here's a book and a half. Rocket Fighter. Yeah, this is a guy called Marno Ziegler. And Marno Ziegler was himself one of the pilots who helped do the testing and operational use of the Me163 Comet. And here we have a first-hand account. This book actually was, excuse me, was obtained from America. Softback, obviously. It's got lots of illustrations in it. You name it, it's all here. It shows the excuse me. It shows the rocket motor we've just seen. It talks about the training period they have to go through. It talks about what it was like to operate this amazing machine. The world's first rocket-powered fighter. Well, first and only, I think. And it talks about, and this is where it gets very interesting, a couple of things that strike you about this book. It talks about their operations against the American Air Force daylight raids against Germany. It skirts around the issue of the Nazis in a way that, if I'm honest, I was a little bit uncomfortable with, because it's just almost like there's little or no mention of things like Hitler, or you know what was going on in Germany and how they were operating that regime, which obviously wasn't very good. And it's a little bit disingenuous. I think it would be better if it had been a bit more honest, a bit more open about it. But it's like it's in denial. It sort of doesn't mention some of these sensitive issues, which I can kind of understand. But just be wary of that. Just be a little bit wary of that. I'm not suggesting it's not accurate in what it's saying at all. It's just it's a bit economical with the truth, I think, on some issues. But we won't let that bog us down. What it does do is it talks about the development of the aircraft and just how incredibly dangerous it was. This thing was more dangerous, literally more dangerous to its own pilots than it was to any American bombers. It was lethal. Trying to get the thing airborne was very dangerous. Just fueling it was dangerous because of these two very volatile components that make up the fuel. It's got no proper landing gear. It has a skid underneath because it jettisons its dolly wheels that you've seen. And it really was the cutting edge of technology, being developed in a very express manner. Health and safety, no, there wasn't a lot of that. They were trying to make it safe, but by its very nature it was quite a dangerous machine. For example, lots of accidents where people have I mean, it comes back down as a glider, so the issue for a lot of people is that if you don't get the approach right for your landing, you're in trouble. You can't go around again like you can with a conventional aircraft and have a second go at it. You have to get the landing right first time. That's it. So every time that there was an accident on landing, frequently these things would flip over, a pilot would have real trouble getting out. If he got a chance, in some cases, the fuel would, the tank would split open, or one of the tanks would split open and mix with the other fuel, and immediately there would either be a massive explosion or fire, or worse still, in the case of one of the components, the hydrogen peroxide, if it burst, it flooded the pilot in a number of cases. And he details one of these incidents that he witnessed firsthand, where the pilot was trapped in the plane, the tank flooded into the cockpit, bathing him in hydrogen peroxide and literally melting the pilot's body, melting it. Little left but a few bones. Half of his body literally just melted away by the acid, corrosive acid. Oh, just incredible, but a very, very interesting read. And he talks about the problems of the hierarchy in the Luftwaffe, big problems between Adolf Galland and Hermann Göring. At the end of the war, this is as defeat was looming for Germany. It's a very interesting read. I mean, it's not a big book, obviously. It's got about 300 pages, is it? Quick look. Oh, it's only 200 pages, just under 200 pages. A really good read, though. I can recommend it. It's hard to get hold of, though. You're going to probably have to go on eBay or Scout bookshops. But if you're in America, you've probably got more chance of getting this than you have in Europe or the UK. But Marno Ziegler, he was a first-hand experience of this aircraft. There's a foreword by Adolf Galland himself, so that's very interesting to read as well. But that is an incredible resource. Now, if you can't get your hands on that, because it is tricky as I mentioned, then the one you should go for, probably more available, is one of the Osprey books, and they got the Jagdgeschwader 400, and this is the Germany's elite rocket fighter unit. This one retails at £15. It's a bit dearer than the other one we talked about with the Tiger, but in fairness, it's more than, I'd say that's more than twice, it's certainly twice as thick. So you're actually only paying 50% more and getting twice as much book. And this is a great book. You know, again, it goes into this detail, and it talks about the entire development of this machine and what the concept was. You know, the early gliders that were being used as test beds, and Alexander Lippisch, the designer of the aircraft, who was a glider expert and delta wing expert, talks all about the development and how they, you know, found a way to operate it, albeit at this very dangerous level and high attrition rate amongst pilots. I mean, Hannah Reich, the German lady test pilot, who was a favourite of Hitler and a confirmed Nazi, unfortunately, but she was a great pilot, and she had a nasty accident in one of these, and she broke her back. I think she was in quite a bad way, and she recovered, but she had some major injuries, so they were lethal. You know, just a dangerous machine. Not recommended. I joked recently in one of my Matchbox reviews about the F-104 Starfighter being not something to take for a flight if you wanted to have a long and healthy life, and this is times 10. This is much more dangerous than that one, and this is just crazy. I mean, some of these exploded, you know, when they were being fueled, blew up, and blowing up the crew and the pilot and everything. And there are photos in here of just probably every photo that's ever been taken, I suspect, that's on the readily available is here. There's even shots here of it in combat taken by gun camera of an American Mustang, I think it is. Yeah, P-51 Mustang of the 335th Fighter Squadron. Took a load of shots here of it in combat. They mustn't have known what it was. You got to remember, it just showed up without warning in the middle of, you know, a regular raid. And it comes whipping past doing, I mean, this is the world's fastest aircraft at the time, no question. So it's doing about 50% quicker than the Mustangs are going, and they can't chase it. But what they learned to do, of course, was, as you probably know, once they realised that it ran out of power and then had to glide back, well, that's when they start chasing it, because then they could keep up with it, no problem. And they'd shoot them up on as they tried to come into land, and a lot of fatalities happened like that, where it was just gliding in and got shot up, you know, and there's no defence. It's got run out of ammo, it's run out of fuel, it's got no chance. So yeah, there's a lot of stories here, and I'm just looking through some of these photographs, some amazing examples of pictures where, you know, the whole history of the aircraft, and it's right to the end of the war. Here's some pictures of it in a field, abandoned, you know, scrap, and what happened to the people, etc. There's a couple of photos of a couple that blew up on the runway. I can't lay my finger on it now, but this is a great resource, I can tell you that. For £15 you can't go wrong. So I would actually recommend that one very strongly. And it's quite an interesting read. And then last but not least, I'm not sure if you spotted this in the sort of foreground here. I'll zoom you in again. We've got here a V1 flying bomb, of all things. This is the Tamiya kit, which is a nice one actually. I quite like it, I've got to say. Here we are, V1 Doodle Bug. And of course these are the things that used to come whistling in over London, starting in June, I think it was June 1944, around the time of D-Day. They started just after, trying to hit back at the Allies, you know. So we've got nicely burned tailpipe, because it's a pulse jet of course on these. And we've got it on a little, like a trolley dolly system. And then of course it's put on a ramp and then zooms off it ultimately. Put that the wrong way around. There we go. So yeah, this is both for this, and some of you may have seen the review I did of the V2 the Revell V2 rocket. So we need something that's a little bit different for that. We have got here two books that I have in my possession. First one is another Osprey book. It's V1 Flying Bomb Aces, so chasing the V1s. So here we've got, it talks about all the experiences of the Spitfire, Tempest and Meteor, as you see here, the Jet Meteor pilots in 1944 and 45, chasing down these buzz bombs, the V1. And all the experiences of trying to keep up with these things, because of course it had a top speed of about 470, 480 miles an hour off the top of my head. Very, very rapid, and a real nightmare. A Spitfire, you know, Mustang is right flat out. You can only catch it when it's going flat out. So they had to, you know, choose how to intercept them. And here we've got Typhoons, we've got Meteors, we've got Mosquitoes, Tempests, etc. So there's quite a variety. Basically, the cream of the Allied fighter squadrons was sent out to intercept them, and it was mainly Tempests, especially on the south coast. I think that was the one that had a lot of success. But of course, then the Meteors came out, and they could keep up with them without any problem at all with the twin jet engines. It's a very good resource. This book talks about the sort of crisis that they had in terms of, you know, affecting London again, being bombed by these things. Then they say about the air-launched versions that the Luftwaffe were using, and how they were ultimately defeated, not only by being shot down, but also, of course, the Allies after D-Day on the ground, once the Battle of Normandy was won, after the collapse of the German army in the west at the Falaise Pocket, they retreated very rapidly across the Seine, and of course abandoned Paris. And once they did that, they pulled straight back to the German border, basically, leaving these V1 flying sites behind, and at places like Epelec in France and along the Dutch border coast, where a lot of these sites were based, they were abandoned. So they were no longer able to fire at London because they didn't have the range. But that's where things got a bit more serious, of course, and we ended up with the V2, and this is a book called Weapons Hunt. Defeating Germany's Secret Weapons, V Weapons Hunt. Now this is a really nice book. I can't remember if I was given this as a gift, I think I was. Just trying to figure out how much it was costing to tell you. A pen and sword book, £25, okay? Invaluable, this. So this is Operation Crossbow, which is the Allied intelligence operation, based at Bletchley Park. No, not Bletchley Park, that's getting mixed up with my intelligence operations, aren't I? It's going to annoy me now, this, because I know the location. It's quite a famous site where they actually set up shop specifically to actually do the intelligence for these operations against these weapons. And I'm just going to read here, see if it tells us Hitler's V1 and V2 weapons. Operation Crossbow. It doesn't matter, I can't spot it. I'll probably come across it any second. Danesfield House in Oxfordshire. They were doing practice runs on British sites, trying to do photo interpretation. This is what it was all about, photo interpretation. And they had a lot of women working in these operations that were very, very invaluable. Skilled photo interpreters, or PIs, as they call them. And they were basically looking at what they call the ski sites, which are the V1 flying bomb sites, just the shape that they tended to have. And they were trying to establish exactly what on earth these things were. And just seen a very interesting photograph as I was flicking through there. Let's try to show you this. The operations at Medmenham, which is where the V3 cannon was being aimed at London. That was a very worrying thing. difficult times. And there's also La Coupole, the thing that's known as La Coupole in near Vengence, which is in northern France, near Saint-Omer. And of course they talk about Peenemünde, which is where the development of these weapons was going on. And it's a really great book. Sorry, I can't quite remember the name of the site, unless it tells me at the back here, where they actually were based in England. They had a site in an English country house, and the name's just escaped me, but it doesn't matter. It's all in this book, so if I can just find the right page, I'll tell you. I'm hoping it shows La Coupole, which is this big dome where they were developing the V2 in northern France. But there's a lot of photographs, and it sort of shows you, you know, what looks like an innocent thing, and then it shows with the arrows what was really hiding there, and what they determined was actually the purpose of some of these sites, which was all nefarious, all very dangerous stuff, and clearly, you know, a major effort by the Nazis to hit the UK and the American air bases and London, and to spread terror basically with these weapons. And that basically is an invaluable book. It tells you the whole of Operation Crossbow. It's all there. I can definitely recommend it to you. One other book that I have alluded to before and have talked about in the previous video, so I'll be very brief with this one, and that's of course A Higher Call. And this is the one that relates to the recent. I did a recent review of the BF 109 G6 from Tamiya, that was painted in the colours of Franz Stiegler, and here he is. And he of course was this pilot that saw this very, very shattered and battered American bomber near Bremen and let it go, didn't shoot it down, even though that was his duty to do so at the time. And this is the entire, this is a softback version, you can get the hardback as well. So it's got about 382 pages thereabouts, and is a really good story. It tells you how these two both respectively got into the respective air forces, and how they came to be in this, you know, this epic clash in the skies over Germany. And Stiegler, of course, he had a brother who fought in the Battle of Britain and was killed as a bomber pilot. He ended up flying these Messerschmitt 109s with a guy called the very famous fighter ace called Marseille. I'm just trying to see if there's a picture of him here. Yeah, Hans Joachim Marseille, and he was a 22-year-old fighter ace, probably considered one of Germany's best fighter aces, but was actually shot down and killed. So he didn't last the African campaign. He didn't get back. So he goes to Africa, goes to the Italian and the Sicilian campaigns, and then of course the defence of the Reich in Germany. And it even gets talking about at the end of the war he ends up flying the Messerschmitt 262 jet fighters, and here they are, abandoned in this case in Austria, a field in Austria, and he ends up in the same squadron as Adolf Galland, and there's a couple of photographs of Galland. We've got a good one. Really Goring here, Goring after his capture. So it's a really good resource, an excellent book. There's Galland, yeah, here he is. Let's zoom in a bit more, see a bit more of this. There he is. Who of course was Germany's probably most senior ace, and became the head of the Messerschmitt 262 jet fighter squadrons. And survived the war, of course, became a historian, helped to make the research for films like The Battle of Britain and many, many others. This is a wonderful book. It's a wonderful story. He talks about Charlie Brown, the American bomber pilot, and he lied about his age to get into the USAF and the 8th Air Force bombing campaign based in England against Germany. And how long after the war, many years later, he ends up living in Canada and finds out by accident that this guy is not only alive, decides to try and seek him out using the US Air Force's network, the Veterans Network, and he ends up finding that these two live only about 600 or 700 miles apart, which is in the schemes of the the northwest of America and Canada, the prairies up there, that's quite near to each other and remarkably close, because Stiegler emigrated to Canada himself, so it's amazing. And they end up meeting, of course, and there are some very moving documentaries on YouTube that you can watch about this. But the book is just amazing because it gives you such an insight into the German perspective of World War II and operating their fighter squadrons. It's a brilliant read. I strongly recommend that to anybody who's interested in those subjects. So there you go. Anyway, that's it for today. I just wanted to share a couple of models on home, but I just really wants to put in your mind the idea of getting some interesting books. Helps you to get your mojo going, to build some models. Always helpful thing. And some of these, especially the rocket fighter one and this one I've just showed you, I mean, they are basically proper stories, true accounts of real World War II life or death experiences on the front line, and it's both riveting reads. I can't recommend those two strongly enough. So see if you can check them out, and if you're doing another subject, don't be shy to go and have a nosy at some of these specialist bookstores like Cressy. They're quite well known, or Pen and Sword. They do some really great stuff, and a lot of these books are actually in their catalogue as well. But others are available, so it's not an exclusive list. Anyway, hope you found it interesting, thought-provoking. Thanks very much for joining me. Hope you give me a thumbs up. If you haven't subscribed to the channel already, please consider doing so. Costs you nothing. And of course you'll get notified of any new videos that might come along in the near future. I might do another talk similar to this about books and models. A couple of interesting ones we could talk about in the future might be the Vulcan bomber, or the TSR-2, the nuclear strike bomber that never was because it got cancelled. And that's in itself a very interesting subject, and of course we have a TSR-2 to hand, so we'll talk about that, and something for you to look forward to if it interests you in the near future. Don't forget to ring the notification bell and you'll be notified when any of these things come up in the future. And in the meantime, thanks very much for joining me, and please take care of yourselves. Thanks a lot, and bye for now.